Well, hello and welcome back to the Product Biz podcast. I'm super excited today because we have a special guest, Joey, here with us, and we're going to talk all about trademarks and legalities and all the fun stuff that goes with it. So, welcome, Joey, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Monica. And for anybody out there who's like, oh, shoot, this is the legal episode, let me skip it. Please don't lean away from this conversation. I talk to so many business owners who are resistant to hear this stuff. And then afterwards, they're like, I'm so glad that I spent 30 or so minutes to better understand this and really keep my business protected.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's usually this type of stuff that people want to just breeze past, but it's this stuff that's the most important. That can like take your
Absolutely.
business down if you don't have it done the right way, right?
Yeah, we don't like talking about this in business, but there are so many risks that can impact a business. And honestly, the reason why I got into trademarks is because I spent about a year being what I now call like a everything but the kitchen sink attorney for business owners. And we did contracts and LLC formations and all this other stuff. And the lawyer in me wants to always say that you should have those things in place, but the more pragmatic business owner side of me wants to say that like so much of the legal crossing the T's and dotting the I's don't matter that much when you're just getting started because your exposure to risk is pretty small. But trademarks are a huge exception to that. And we have just seen too many business owners get blindsided by trademarks, right, when they were getting started or maybe years later. And so this really is something that no matter how new you are to the business world, we need to talk trademarks.
Well, tell me the basics. What is a trademark for someone who's like, okay, cool, sounds pretty serious, sounds like I should listen. What is a trademark?
Yeah, trademarks are one of the weirdest parts of the law because I think it's one of the things that people kind of understand the most just by being a human being in society. It's one of those legal terms that we tend to interact with as customers quite a bit. And so even though it's kind of a weird, there's a weird technical definition that I don't even use anymore because it tends to just confuse people, but it's like we know it when we see it. Like it probably won't surprise any of your listeners to know that like huge brands like Apple and Target and Nike all have their brands trademarked, but like what does that mean, right?
Hmm.
So trademarks are they usually are business names. They can be a logo, a slogan. The way that I think about it is if if I was to say that a company out there owned the phrase Hakuna Matata, if you had to guess, who do you think owns it?
That would be like Disney, right? Lion
Absolutely.
King.
Absolutely. So that thought process is a trademark at work.
Mm.
So whenever you see or hear something and it makes you think of a particular brand, that is a trademark.
Hmm.
It can be the name of a podcast, the name of a course, but it's anything that you're putting out there that when people see or hear it, they think of your brand and not a competitor.
And when you actually get it trademarked, like this phrase, this logo, this business name, whatever it is, that prevents other people from being able to use it. Is that right?
Yes, and this is where we can jam out because I think that this stuff is like interesting in kind of like a geeky way. I talk to so many business owners where the more they learn about trademarks, the more that they want to know about it because the more you learn about it, it is really interesting. So I will say too that like one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making is they think to themselves like trademarks sound like a nice to have, but not a must have. And do I really need a trademark if I already have a fill in the blank?
Hmm.
Whether it's, I hear a lot of, or I got my LLC, so I don't need a trademark, or I already grabbed the domain name or the social media handle, so I don't really need a trademark. Unfortunately, that's not really how this works. Um, None of those things, a domain name, an LLC, social media handle, none of those give you legal evidence of the fact that you actually own that company name. or podcast name or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And the way it works in the US, trademarks are weird in that there's really two different layers of trademark rights. So there's what are called common law trademarks, and then there's registered trademark rights. So, in a weird way, just by being in business, you automatically have trademark rights. You don't
Mm.
have to necessarily file any paperwork or pay any money to say that your brand is trademarked. Just by being in business and being the first to use that company name or whatever, you technically have some trademark rights, those common law trademark rights. But it only gives you like regional exclusive rights. So bigger than a city, smaller than a state. And you don't really have any evidence of the fact that you own it. So if there's ever a dispute, it can become really expensive to lean on just common law trademark rights. Um, but that's actually common law trademark rights are what you can use that little TM symbol for. So that means I don't have anything registered, but I can claim this. So you can use that TM symbol if you're not using it. But that's different from a registered trademark. So only with a registered trademark do you have actual evidence of the fact that you own not just your trademark, but anything that's confusingly similar. And so whenever I talk to like my little nieces and nephews about what I do, I say, like it's kind of like a house versus a fence. Just by
Mhm.
being in business, you technically have a house, but it's not very well protected. So what I do is I help business owners build a fence around their house. And so it's much easier for them to have those protections in place and have evidence.
Yeah, and what are we really protecting against? Like, I'm hearing you saying it's offense and it's necessary and needed, but if you don't have this, what can potentially happen if you don't have a registered trademark?
Yeah. So the reason why we now do trademarks again is because we just kept hearing of clients get blindsided by this. But there were some really big horror stories. Like we had a now client that spent several months planning a family vacation to Hawaii. And while she was in Hawaii, got hit with a cease and desist letter that her podcast name needed to change.
Mhm.
And so she had to spend that entire vacation where she was really looking forward to being with her family, chained to her laptop in the hotel room, coming up with a new name, new graphics, dealing with the legal side of things, educating her audience. Um, the weird thing about getting a cease and desist letter on your podcast name or your business name is it's kind of like not just getting one flat tire, but all four of your tires going flat at once, where you lose the ability to continue marketing your podcast name, your business name, whatever it is, when someone claims that they have these rights that supersede yours. And that's why it's again another mistake that I see is people saying, okay, I see that this is important, but I'll handle this later. The issue is that over 500,000 trademark applications are getting applied for and registered every year.
Wow.
And with that many trademarks getting registered, there's a really strong chance that you're accidentally infringing on someone else.
Mhm.
And so we see this all the time in the online business world and the product world where people just come up with a name, maybe do some research, if any, and then they just run with it. And these days, with business industries being so saturated, there's just a really good chance that giving you all the benefit of the doubt, you're accidentally infringing on somebody else.
Yeah. Which is crazy because I know when I had my skincare business, I did not do anything with trademark before I started it. It was such a hobby that turned into a business
Yes.
that I didn't even know. And this is why I'm so glad to have you on here because I think a lot of people probably don't even know the importance of this or what can happen. And that cease and desist letter, I'm sure that is just a like the rug being swept out from under you. Because what can a cease and desist say? Does it say, like, starting immediately, you cannot use this brand name on any of your products, on any of your website, anywhere online? Or do they give you like 7 to 10 days? Or do they charge you a fine if you don't change it? Like, I'm sure it varies depending on who's sending it, but what actually
Yeah.
happens in that?
So it does and can vary. I mean, legally, they are entitled to saying immediately stop it. They might even say, hey, even if you stop it now, we already are seeing certain penalties and damages, and you have to pay us
Oh,
to do
wow.
certain things.
Mhm.
That's pretty rare. I also think that in today's world, especially with larger brands, there's this sense of like there's an HR component to sending cease and desist letters. And so nobody wants their really kind of bully kind of cease and desist letter, being put online and them getting a bad rap.
Right.
So usually the ones that we see are more like, we take this very seriously. We might give you 30 to 90 days or so to make changes. But are pretty unwavering in saying you need to change this. And
Mhm.
as it stings so much to get a cease and desist letter, but then the next step is shoot, now I have to come up with a new name. And I don't know anybody who like likes naming stuff in business.
Yeah.
It can be a real challenge, especially when you really love the thing that you picked first.
Yeah, and two, for product-based business owners, I think there's obviously a ton of work that goes to changing anything online, but with the product, it's like you got to change your labels. You got to buy new
Yes.
labels. You got to buy new packaging. You have all this print
Yes.
material that maybe has your existing brand name that now you can no longer use. So I think it's, in my opinion, even more pressing for someone who has a physical product because it's rework, but it's also a ton of money that you might need to respend as well.
100%. What we're seeing with product businesses is a trademark dispute can easily cost tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Uh, there are a cease and desist letter can also require recalling products.
Oh, interesting. Like pulling it from the shelves or getting
Yes.
it back from customers even?
I mean, potentially, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
So you really do want to think about this. And um, I mentioned earlier that over 500,000 trademarks are registered every year. This is where, again, it gets very interesting. Um, Over half of the trademark applications that get filed end up getting rejected.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
And we haven't talked about that either because a lot of people think, oh, there's so much in business that if I want to get an LLC, I just file the paperwork and it's like 100% chance it's going to get done. If I want a domain name, I don't like apply for the domain name, I just buy it. And I think we're used to this idea in business that if you want to do something in business, you just kind of pay for it and it's done. The trademark process is more of an audition application process where you really are applying for the rights to use it. And there's a pretty good chance, especially if you try and do it on your own, that it's going to get denied.
And what are those main reasons that it gets denied, or what do you recommend there? Because I have many members in my program who have gotten a trademark, and almost all of them said, yeah, the first time we went through, it got denied. And then
Yeah.
they either had to like update or change or like apply in a different way. But tell me more if there are main categories as to why it's getting denied, and then what people have to do afterwards if that happens.
There is one major reason why it gets denied, which is that it's too similar to another trademark. And this is where I'd love to go deeper with you because, again, if this can help any one of your listeners, then it's very much worth us talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, Again, we're so used to like domain name thinking as business owners, where if if the domain name's not available, maybe we add an S at the end or a the in the beginning. And we think that if we make these very slight tweaks, then technically things are available. That's not really how trademarks work. There is a free database you can go to search trademarks. Um, and you might notice if you run a search on that database, if you search for something, it won't just do like a direct what are the results that you're looking for, it kind of pulls more similar trademarks. So a lot of people look at that and think, well, no one has exactly what I'm looking for, so I'm fine. But the trademark office takes a pretty broad view of what is potentially similar.
Mhm.
And I found that the best way to understand why they do that is to put yourselves in the shoes of a customer. So, Monica, are you familiar with the that Blue Apron company, the food subscription
Yeah.
box?
Yeah.
Okay. So they own the registered trademark for Blue Apron in like the food space. Another company applied for Green Apron and it got denied. The trademark office essentially said, yes, blue is a different color than green. But if you put yourselves in the shoes of a very loyal Blue Apron customer that is now getting ads for something around Green Apron, they might think that that's Blue Apron's like all veggies box or like
Mm.
their recycled packaged version of what they're doing. And so it's not about can a customer tell the difference between these two. It's a question of could a customer think that there is a common source as to these
Mhm.
goods or services?
So when that happens in this perfect example, is there a way around it? Is it like work with a trademark attorney like you who knows how to get around it, who knows how to apply? Or is it literally, if you get rejected for this, the course of action is you probably need a different name?
So there are I hate the legal response of like it depends, but it really
Yeah.
does. There are a
Yeah.
lot of different ways to go around this. For example, when we applied for indie law as a trademark, initially it did get denied um, because the trademark office thought that it was too similar to a company that like provided legal services to like TV and movie companies, which is like not at all what we do. So we tried to fight it. Um, we weren't successful. We applied again, got assigned to a different examining attorney. There are thousands of examining attorneys that all think about this situation kind of differently. And so the next one allowed it. That is an option of let's refile and see if we get lucky and get another examining attorney. Um, that's less common. There is a way to fight it, but usually what we think about is we like to think of it not as like a you're good or there's a problem and you have to change. If you work with our law firm, we always do these comprehensive search reports before we move forward with anything. And depending on the search results, we give you almost like a weather forecast of what it looks like. So either like clear skies, we don't see anything that's potentially similar, partly cloudy, all the way to like tornado warning. And so the tornado warning situation is usually where we say, look, we think it's most likely that they are going to deny this. And so here are some ways that you could potentially move forward. Um, Again, you don't want to be an accidental infringer. And so if there is very stark, we didn't know that that thing was out there, it might be time to proactively rebrand before you get hit with a cease and desist letter.
Right. I love it.
Um, or it might be worth, we do work with quite a few personal brands. I know that's kind of popular in the product space too, of people just having their name be their company. It is possible to get your name registered as a trademark. Um, but a lot of business owners think that there's a pretty low risk to like other companies trademarking a name that's similar to yours. So what we tend to see in those spaces are, okay, maybe it's not um, your 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 personal branded company that is the priority to trademark, but maybe there's a slogan that you use or a catchphrase or like a signature product line that we do want to make sure that you are grabbing exclusive rights to.
Um, Well, that brings me to a question from something that you said earlier. You mentioned you can get a trademark for a logo, for a slogan, like you just mentioned, for a brand name. So when someone is going down this trademark route, do you have to get like both logo and brand name if we take the simplest form of it? Or is it like your brand name is enough? Is that two different trademarks that you're getting if you do go down that route? Because I can see how this can start to expand. So what do you recommend
Absolutely.
for people?
Absolutely. So Again, unfortunately, it depends on the situation, but usually what we recommend is let's apply for and let's say that you have a logo that includes like the name of the company in like a very stylized way, right? If we see that, we usually like to get the words only trademarked first because that gives you the broadest protections around the words. The logo version is helpful to say, okay, not just the words, but if someone comes up with a different name, but it's stylized similarly, it's got a similar, kind of visual icon on the side of it or above the words. And when you apply for a stylized trademark or a logo version of a trademark, you have the option of whether you want that to be protected in like silhouette form, like black and white, where you're not claiming a color, or you can claim color as a part of the trademark, which again, uh, usually you go broader, you go more general, you say, I want this in like black and white form. But if you've got a really unique color as a part of your branding logo and you don't want another company in the space, even if they have a totally different business name, to use your very unique yellow or blue or whatever it is that you're using, it it usually goes words only, then like black and white logo, then maybe a color specific logo.
Yeah, beautiful. And I like where this conversation is going because we kind of started with more like reactive. Like, what if you get a cease and desist? What if shit hits the fan? And now it's a little bit more like proactive. So, can you tell me how having a trademark can also prevent like copycats, right? It can prevent from someone doing something similar to you and being more preventative.
Yes, yes. So we always have conversations with our clients about when we're working with you through the trademark registration process, our priority is defense. We want you to avoid getting hit with a cease and desist letter. As we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, where you're going to get the trademark registered, now we can start to shift to playing offense. And we want to be careful. Again, I think this stuff is very interesting. So, like, pardon me if I go a bit above and beyond in terms of like legal stuff, but I think this is very helpful to know because um, a trademark registration is obviously very helpful, but it's very important to know that your trademark rights are actually um, triggered based on priority of when you first used the trademark, not when the trademark was registered or because it's registered. So theoretically, if another company used your trademark or used a company like yours first and you got it trademarked first, you do need to be careful because if you send a cease and desist letter to them and they can show with a lot of evidence that they used the business name before you did, regardless of your registration, they have priority rights and they
Wow.
could even file to cancel your registration.
Super
So
interesting.
once our clients' trademarks are registered, we can help you monitor the industry to see what other accidental infringers or potential copycats are out there so that yes, maybe we send a cease and desist letter, but before we do that, let's do some due diligence to make sure that we can be pretty confident that you used it before they started using it.
Hmm.
That's also really important because um, after your trademark is registered for 5 years, you have the ability to file for what's called incontestability. And once you file for that and it gets accepted, no one can challenge your rights on prior use grounds anymore. So that first 5 years of having your trademark registered, you want to be really careful and intentional about seeing those potential copycats that you want to go after. And then once you've passed that 5 year mark, you've got that incontestable trademark registration status, then we can much more confidently go after people regardless of who might have used it first.
Yeah, and I can see what you're saying that like the defense side is probably most impactful, especially for smaller businesses because you don't
Yes.
want to get shut down. And then probably when you get big enough to a certain extent, you're like, I don't want other people to start using my colors, using my brand name. Let's see if anyone's there that we need to shut down. But I feel like most people, it's like, I don't want to get a shut down. I don't want to cease and desist. I want to make sure I'm legally safe with my brand name, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we just went down a very long rabbit hole of like what is the most common reason why a trademark would get denied, which is this likelihood of confusion issue. There's one other reason why it would get denied that I want to address, and it's becoming more and more popular in the space, which is uh, the more descriptive or generic your company name is, the less likely it's going to get registered. What the trademark office is doing is saying, hey, yes, we want to make sure that companies with more unique, kind of suggestive, made up names, uh, we want to make sure that that uniqueness is protected because it stands out in the marketplace. Like Starbucks doesn't have anything to do with coffee, just in the nature of the word. So the fact that they're building a well-known brand where when you hear Starbucks, you think coffee, they should be able to have that protected. But no coffee company can trademark the coffee shop and then exclude others from using that phrase.
Mhm.
And so I say that because it's becoming very common across all industries, but we're seeing it in the product space as well, to just come up with something that is very on the nose of like, here's what my product is. That might make sense from a marketing perspective of like, hey, people know this, they see it, they buy it, but it becomes very hard, if not impossible, to get exclusive rights to something that is generic. So be very careful before you move forward with a very generic business name.
I love that. I think that's so insightful because I can totally see, like you said, marketing, SEO. Choose a name that people are going to literally type into Google for what you sell and have that as your brand name. But that's super interesting. That's something super generic and like so on the nose is going to potentially be flagged. I think that is great advice. And that probably comes up in this weather report that you said, right? Of like, okay, we're kind of going into some stormy territory because this seems to be a little generic type of situation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And the generic piece, again, I just want to be clear here. Um, the reason why we don't recommend it is because let's just assume that your business takes off and you become wildly successful and there are copycats. You now can't go after those copycats because you've picked a generic name.
Mhm.
And it's because you can't play offense that they're not it's just a really weak naming strategy. Now I will say there might be parts of your business, and I know that we're talking to like product businesses and not like course creators, but if you're wanting to take certain branding steps and create like a podcast or an online course or something in your branding, there might be a time and a space to name something that's underneath your branding in a very generic way, but you really want to think about this risk before you move forward with that.
Yeah. Love that. Great tip. Okay, share with me, are there any other main mistakes that product-based businesses are making when it comes to trademarks? Anything else that
Yeah,
comes up?
there's one huge one, which is this thing that I tend to hear from like our like A students that are like in our audience of like people that know this, maybe they've been following me for a while, that they're trying to do it on their own. They say like I did a search and I'm fine. You have to keep in mind that because of that likelihood of confusion, Blue Apron versus Green Apron, comprehensive trademark searches are very tricky to do and they expire immediately. So again, with over half a million applications being filed, we unfortunately see this all the time where even with our own clients, we run a comprehensive search report for them. For whatever reason, we struggle to get in touch with them for a few months. They get back to us, they're like, I'm so sorry, I got so busy, but let's continue the process. Someone else applied for a trademark that they wanted to. So once you've done that due diligence of that availability search, don't delay getting the application filed.
Yeah, such good feedback. Don't wait on it. Don't sleep on it.
Absolutely.
Get it done, right?
Yep.
So would you recommend for people to do this like pretty early on in their business journey, or if they haven't done it yet and they're a little bit further along, it's like this is the top priority, you should make sure to do this.
It is the number one legal priority for product businesses.
Yeah. I love it. Well, tell us how people can work with you and what you offer and how you work with product businesses to help them get this done because legal stuff is always tricky in terms of like nuances. And like you said, a lot of things just depend on the situation. So I always recommend if there's anything where the answer is it depends, work with someone who knows what it depends on, which I know you have a ton of insight. So tell us what it's like to work with you or what you offer product business owners for trademarks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you want a helpful like complement to this episode, kind of a refresher on the context, you can go to indielaw.com/checklist. And we have a PDF guide that walks through a lot of the points that we've been talking about today. You can also book a free consultation call with us on that website. We have different types of tiered flat fee packages, depending on what you're wanting help with in terms of whether you want us to take over most of the work or kind of all of it, and include if potentially there are certain risks that might be filed or an opposition that gets filed, that's all included. So you can ask us about our flat fee packages. We also want to make sure that we're empowering business owners that might feel like they don't have a budget to work with an attorney to get started on their own. So we do have an online course with like a 12-month payment plan. And we've had hundreds of business owners and product business owners go through the course. What's great about it is you can get through the course in like 3 hours. So like over the weekend, you can file your trademark. And if you go through the course and still decide, you know what, I'd love to have an expert help with this, whatever you paid for the course can get credited towards a done for you service.
Amazing. And where can people find that course or find out more about you online too?
Yeah, it's all at indielaw.com. So go there, book a free consultation call with us, and we can break down both the course and what it would be like to work with us one-on-one.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. This is great. I learned a ton of new stuff. I know that the people listening are going to be like, okay, cool. Trademarks. Let's get it done. This is some serious business. This is important. But I think the flip side of it too is I'm sure after people get the trademark, it just makes you feel so much more like legitimate, so much more confident. It's like I own this. This is mine, my little piece of the world, right? So
It's
so many
very
benefits to
cool.
it.
It's very cool when you get that trademark certificate that you can use. We've had a couple of clients tell us that it's almost like, those those business like brick and mortar businesses that like tape their like first dollar bill to the cash register.
Yeah.
It's that way of like, yeah, like we're actually in business. Like this is something that really points to the fact that we're legit.
Yeah. It's like a birth certificate, but for your business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Joey. This was awesome. I'll link all the links that you mentioned in the show notes so people can get in contact with you and learn more. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Monica. And if you guys liked this episode, don't forget to leave a review, please.
Oh,
It'll make
yeah.
Monica's day.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you for being my spokesperson. Listen to Joey, leave a
I got
review.
you.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the Product Biz Podcast.